do you want me to sit there?
Yep. Well, wherever. Sure, okay. Are these alright here? Can they just stay at that business then? It's fine.
I might move them over again.
Sure.
Because they were going to be in the middle there, so I'll just move them over. I might strike them.
I'll just say that.
But you can move. There is a handheld microphone.
Right. Is
But if you want the handheld. Coffee?
I would have liked something to read from.
Oh, we've got, I think something's coming, because I felt the same.
Something with a bit of paper on
Yeah, yeah. She's Emily's just gone to find another lecture, hasn't she? It's that one there. Oh, that is it?
Yep.
That would be.
Is that right? Well, it was a bit tough for me, but I don't mind. I can.
Let's see how you feel about this.
Tutoring by Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, when I'm on the step, that's fine. Okay, fine. Will we be able to be heard at that do that?
And then, well, I can pull that up.
That will be when we can use it. I might see Robert High Middles.
Middles. Unusual one. So where was it? There?
There. Not now.
Okay,
It's
start.
there. Start there. And I'll invite all the speakers up.
And is this how lit the church
No,
is?
yes, actually, it is. Yeah, yeah, they've got the up and lights on. And hopefully, a few more people will come. It's nearly 7
Well,
o'clock.
most of the D stream will come.
Yes,
Very nice
I mean,
stream.
yeah. And
So
most
is
of the
anyone?
most of the R stream actually
Yeah.
come. Well,
Most of the streams have come, but they're not in yet. I notice very
yes.
few, if one.
We're using this one now here.
Yes, please.
That's perfectly fine, but I want to strike it for the musicians just because
Yep,
it's
that's
streaming for YouTube and it will
Yep.
look better without that.
Yep.
So
Do you want me-
they're fine.
Yes,
Everything's
do
fine.
you want me to move that?
We'll do it. We'll put it
Put it back
where it's
there, fine.
needed. Yeah.
Okay. All right, you all right with it? So you got visual aids, props.
Yeah, I've got a few props. I need them. I might not use them.
Go on.
Yeah, normally I have slides, you see, that's much easier.
It's easy. Come on.
Well, when you're an artist, it is
doesn't go to your app usually.
No, we need. So what are we doing here?
Oh, let's go and see how to
Beautiful. It's running good.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to see you here this evening. We'll just begin with some quiet, as this is part of Justice Day, which is all about stillness. And there are many events happening across the country and in other parts of the world where we are keeping a moment of silence on the hour, every hour. So just to begin, so I'd just like to first of all welcome you here to this evening. My name is Emily Johnston. I'll be chairing the event this evening. I'm a health and wellbeing practitioner, and I did my bit last year, really speaking at the event last year. So tonight I'm chairing, and we have a wonderful lineup. We'll begin with music from Andrew Gorman and Josh. We've got some lovely music for you this evening to start the evening, to set the tone. And then we have three fantastic speakers, Jeremy Sinclair, Rosalind, Wyatt, and Poole, who I'll introduce as and when they will be speaking. Then once they've spoken, we will have question time. So if you have any questions, we'll come round with a roving mic and do ask whatever questions you'd like. Throughout the evening, we will hopefully stop at appropriate moments on the hour, just to have a few moments of silence in keeping with the theme of Justice Day. So thank you very much. I think that's it. Without further ado, I'll please introduce you to Andrew Gorman and Josh, who will be playing for you this evening. Thank you very much.
Hello, yes, so I'm Andrew Poole and this is Josh Middleton. Together we are Don Kipper, or at least 2 sevens of Don Kipper, just so that you know where we come from. We're going to play some gypsy music, including gypsy jazz music. Actually, we're going to start there, and then some actual Eastern European gypsy music as well. Thank you. So that's an old jazz standard, All of Me, with a bit of gypsy jazz style. And now we're going to play some authentic East Bulgarian music, actually. Some kopernetsas, which are dances in 11 meter, for those of you who are interested in irregular time signatures.
Kopernetsa means little digging dance.
Little digging.
Imagine
dance.
digging.
Yeah. Thank you. So that's the digging dances of Bulgaria, and I think we're going to stagger our programme this evening and go back to gypsy jazz now, but not without a little bit of a Russian twist. So this is Ochi Chernye, or Les Yeux Noirs, for those of you who speak French, or Dark Eyes, if anyone who speaks English here. Thank you. So that's Dark Eyes. My favourite version of that song is by Louis Armstrong, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Other than the one we just done, obviously.
He does it in Russian, but only the first two
Only
words.
the first two words.
And then he goes
Only
into
bothered to
sort
learn
of
the
like
first two.
jazz talk.
Makes his own up for the rest of it, which is great. which is incidentally exactly what Josh has done. But you'll have to come to a Don Kipper show if you want to hear his original lyrics to that one. He's got them, believe me.
They're in bad French.
Multilingual. So
Next one's going to be a klezmer tune. It's a horror, which is a slow dance. And this one's called David Spiel noch einmal.
David spielt das noch einmal. I'll have you know.
Yiddish pronunciation.
Straight in.
Go give it a doing.
Okay. remarkable, isn't it?
Marshall.
Indeed. So that one actually combines the two themes, musical themes at least, of our performance. Gypsy jazz combined with a Jewish horror. Specifically a Jewish horror, not to be confused with the Romanian horror, which is in 2 and fast. This is a wonky one. Anyway, now we're going to go to Frelex, which is another type of Jewish wedding dance. And this is the Frelex from Warsaw, the Warszawa Frelex. And we combine it with an original composition from the clarinet player in our band, Daniel Gooley. Shout out to him if he's watching. Aleph Frelex. And then Wie bist du vor der Prohibition gewesen, which is what were you up to before the Prohibition? Another old Jewish klezmer tune.
say we've been Don Kipper.
Yeah, thank you. Dave.
Thank you. We've been Don Kipper. Thank you for having us. And if you like us, come talk to us afterwards, or write us a little message.
There are 7 of us when we're at full forces, so we're even louder than we were just then. And we like to plug in as well sometimes, you know. So there's potential there for volume. We don't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don Kipper. Wonderful music and a great start to the evening. So, I'd just like to introduce the subject for this evening. When Elizabeth Edmonds, who organised this event, told me what the topic was going to be for this evening, I was delighted. I had heard this question being asked last year in the evening event, and it seemed then to be so relevant and such a broad topic that could be really explored in more depth. Ambition is all around us, in the buildings we see, in the way people work, and in the product of their success. Being here in central London, one of the greatest cities in the world, we are at the very centre of worldly ambition, which all too often goes hand in hand with ego, desires, and sometimes greed. It seems to be an innate part of the human condition to achieve, to progress and create. Also, part of the human condition is the desire to look inward, to connect with a deeper sense of self. And indeed, this is where the creative juices begin to flow. To explore what we are and what our connection is to the universe. To experience, in some small way at least, the divine that is within us all. And yet, both of these sometimes seem contrary for each other, at odds with one another. The first, seeking results, looking for gain, requiring progress. The second, seeming to require a letting go of the individual, a release from the repetition of desires and ego. So how can we be in this world of ambition and desires, but still truly be on a spiritual path? How can we reconcile these two? This is what we've asked our speakers to explore here, and hopefully, if it's not too ambitious, we may come to some clearer understanding this evening. So I'd like to begin by introducing our first speaker, Jeremy Sinclair, who is chairman of MC and Saatchi, the very well-known and successful advertising agency. He has been described as the quiet man of advertising. In addition to his career in advertising, Jeremy is a tutor of philosophy at the School of Economic Science, a father and grandfather who, with his wife Jackie, has just written a book, Faces, 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 for children, with a gentle message about treating possessions with respect. Jeremy Sinclair.
Thank you very much for that introduction. You've stolen most of the thunder from what I was going to say, but I'll go through it anyway. And if you feel a bit tired, just nod off. I won't mind. But Emily's introduction, I think, summed up the quandary and the matter beautifully. So, this time last year, this question arose: having ambition and a spiritual life, are they compatible? Now, first of all, I must say that I make no claim to be having subdued ambition or mastered the spiritual life. I make no claim in that area. Now, ambition gets a bad press. If you look it up in the dictionary, this is what you find. The shorter Oxford Dictionary says, the eager or inordinate desire of honour or preferment. So that's ambition for you. The eager or inordinate desire of honour or preferment. So this is not too spiritual, really, is it? Not so far, anyway. So I thought, well, that's for the Oxford Dictionary. I thought, what about a second opinion? So I turned to the Americans. I thought the Americans would be better at this, being a bit more gung-ho, a bit more willing to climb up the greasy pole. They might be more sympathetic to the whole idea of ambition. So what did Webster say? He said, an eager or inordinate desire for preferment, superiority, power, or honour. So he's made it worse. To be honest, he's added to honour and preferment, he's added the inordinate desire for superiority and power. These are not helping these people, they're really not. Now, anyway, the Americans can't spell honour anyway, so... Back to the Oxford Dictionary. That's a second and a third definition. The second says ostentation, pride of state. Not too attractive so far. And it doesn't sound like this ambition is going to get you to heaven. And then there's a third. Our hope is in the third. There's a third definition. It's a strong desire to be or to do anything creditable. A strong desire to be or do anything creditable. Guilty, I plead guilty with this. I may be guilty to numbers 1 and 2, but I'm not prepared to admit it, not here, not in front of you, particularly not in front of my wife who's sitting there. But number 3, the strong desire to be or to do anything creditable is recognisable, very recognisable. And if my late mother were here, she would agree that I have this tendency. When I was quite young, she said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, successful. She said, no, you don't understand. You're supposed to pick something at which you can be successful. But anyways, the definition says it's anything that you can do that allows you to be creditable. Now, is this a barrier to spiritual work, to spiritual life? In the end, you're going to have to decide. And I'm going to offer you a few thoughts tonight. If you take the word ambition to bits, you get ambi and the ischen bit, which means, it comes from the Latin, and these two roots mean to get around, round and to get around. And it's what Roman candidates did, sort of early canvassing. They'd go around looking for support. That's the way ambition, that's the way we get the word from. So ambitious people, they go around, they go about. This is how they do anything creditable. They get out to attempt to do something creditable. They get out and attempt to do something creditable. To do something creditable. Now, if you take where you're sitting right now, the designer who designed this and 50 other churches in London, 50 plus, including the most famous, probably in England, St. Paul's Cathedral, he designed all these things. Now, trust me, as the owner and restorer of a minute Italian chapel, you could fit it in this sort of small area here. You don't build 51 churches. You don't build what until 1962 was the tallest building in London, unless you have ambition. This is not the product of a man who had no ambition. Sir Christopher Wren, the designer, astronomer, geometer, architect, he said, "Architecture aims at eternity." So that's an aim. That dwarfs most of our aims and ambitions. You don't get loftier than eternity. If you would see his epitaph, look around you. This is what it says in St. Paul's. You look around you, as here, this is the epitaph of Sir Christopher Wren. Survived bombs, the Blitz, the worst the Germans could drop on us. Now, if again you look at this building, who is it? What name? What's it called? James. It's named after James. James and John. James was the son of Zebedee. You all know that. And he was along with his brother, he was the first disciple of Jesus. Now, Jesus nicknamed James Boanerges, which means thunder, son of thunder. And he named him this, it is said, on account of his fiery temper. James is also reported as being the first martyr. Herod had him killed, and I guess this was probably not unconnected with his fiery temper. The temper is usually caused when one's will, one's ambition is thwarted. So here you are, you're in a profoundly spiritual building, created and named after men of ambition, will, and extraordinary vision. They had a strong desire to be and to do something creditable. And you're sitting in it now. Hundreds and thousands of years later, we're sitting in their realized ambition. Is there a space more spiritual than this? Let's look for a moment at the proposition the other way round. Is it possible to be seriously ambitious without a spiritual dimension? So I'm now asking you the question the other way around. Is it possible to be seriously ambitious if you don't have a spiritual dimension? If you like your work to echo down the ages, stick to the spiritual. The spiritual work outlasts the materialists, even the artists and the scientists. Those men get richer, artists get superseded, the scientists get surpassed by their successors. Only the philosophers and the spiritual leaders stand out of time. Moses, Manu, Plato, Krishna, they all live on. Thought outlasts things. Now, if our aims are more modest, then the spiritual path again might be useful. To succeed at anything, we have to forgo the things that would thwart our ambitions. To win the 100 metres race, donuts may have to be abandoned for a while. To amass a great fortune or receive a small fortune, spending may have to be curtailed. So what helps us forgo the irrelevant, the unhelpful? All the spiritual practices that you have followed for years. You may not know this, but you're better prepared for success than many of the people you know. Now, that's not why you did it, but that is, in fact, I would suggest, the case. Remember, the ambitious go around. They're not daunted by what lies ahead. They go around powered by their sense of direction. Obstacles are simply there to make us stronger. The Shankaracharya of the North, Shantananda Saraswati, who guided many of us, many of the people here, during his life, he encouraged us in 1978 to be companions of the self and masters of the world simultaneously. In the spirit of Advaita, there is no separation of the spiritual and the practical. So, if we have established, helped by Sir Christopher Wren and St. James, that ambitions don't have to be harmful, they can be good, or at least they can be neutral, are all ambitions equal? The short answer is, it may not be the ambition which is dangerous, but the pronoun which precedes it. My ambition might be good for me, but probably not too good for everyone else. If the ambition is for all men, then that changes everything. The ancient prayer, which many of you know, all be happy, all be without disease, etc. Now, coming even closer to home, why are we here? What is the ambition tonight? One of the stars of the advertising firmament, a chap called David Ogilvy, Scottish descent, learnt to cook in Paris, went to America to seek his fortune, and he founded one of the largest advertising agencies in the world, David Ogilvy, and he wrote a book in 1963 called Confessions of an Advertising Man. Now, I recommend this book to anyone who enjoys and appreciates succinct writing and lucid thinking. Confessions of an Advertising Man. It's well worth reading. It's worth reading if you want to know how to write. Anyway, the book is slightly self-serving. He was starting his own global agency at the time, but that can be easily seen through. Anyway, in his book, he has the following quote: "When Ascanius spoke, they said how well he speaks. But when Demosthenes spoke, they said, let us march." So the aim here tonight is to encourage you to march. To march in step with your ambition. For you to recognize it and realize it. Find out what you want and give it to all. The Proverbs say, without a vision the people perish. What's your ambition other than you resolve to realize your vision? So, to sum up, to think that people with ambition are denied a spiritual life is like denying a spiritual life to people with blue eyes or red hair. It's divisive, dualist, and defeatist. In fact, I'd go further. To overcome the barriers to self-fulfillment, ambition is required. To be of service to the world, ambition is required. And the bigger your ambition, the better. At least the size of St. Paul's. So your ambition keeps you going, keeps you going around the difficulties, round the rocks, round the storms of life. Not only is it compatible with spiritual life, but I suggest it is a necessity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. That was beautifully said. I think now it would be useful just to have a few moments to reflect on what's been spoken of. And then we'll have our next speaker. So we'll have a few moments of silence now. So a lovely introduction to the subject this evening from Mr. Sinclair. And an interesting question also to ask, is a spiritual life possible without ambition? Turning the question around. I'd like to introduce our second speaker this evening, who I've known for many years, is Rosalind Wyatt. She is a British visual artist from London. Initially trained in calligraphy, she went on to study textiles at the Royal College of Art. She's developed her own technique of writing with a needle, combining text and textile, where she hand stitches by eye the handwriting of an individual onto a garment. Zen brushwork has also become part of her artistic practice, and she has spent time studying this at Source in Japan. She lectures, talks, and teaches widely, and has many high-profile clients. I think she makes an excellent addition to our panel of speakers discussing this topic, as she works for herself and creates her own opportunities through her work. Rosalind Wyatt.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Without you, we'd be standing here alone, so thank you. Yes, my name is Rosalind, and I'm an artist, and I hope to shed some light on this topic from an artistic point of view and from my life as a practicing artist. So, for me, I believe art comes from the soul. That is actually where it is coming from. It's coming from our human condition and all its frailties that offers. And this, I suppose, we call inspiration. And for me, the question is, well, how can we access that within ourselves and within others, and to facilitate that within others? And so this question of ambition and spirituality is, as Jeremy has said, very much connected, really. Without the ambition, you couldn't create, and without the spirit, there could be no expression. So for me, they are very much connected. But I suppose we need to see those things that hinder our creativity, that are barriers to that flow of consciousness and that innate creative source that is flowing through us. So we need a setup. And when I say a setup, I mean we need the tools with which to express ourselves, with which to express this art. I'm always very envious when I see musicians just pick up a fiddle and play a wonderful tune, because it just seems so easy, and you can just see it. For me, I feel it, I can see it. It's like the musician and the music and the instrument just become one, and that is just a display of this inspiration that I'm talking about. But for me, it was a longer path, I suppose, and it really started with a love of the spiritual in the form of words of the great masters, words of the great philosophers, Sanskrit, chanting, sound, vibration, and that really led me to my first ambitious choice, if you like, which was to study calligraphy. And this took me to this course, this 3-year degree course, where I basically learnt to write again. That is what it felt like. Picking up a calligraphy pen and learning how to use it to form a letter and to learn about the history that goes behind a whole letter form. So ambition, I suppose, got me to that point, and then the learning and the skill took over. And I just want to talk a bit about what it is to learn a craft and what that involves, because I think ambition will take you so far, but then after a while the ambition has to give way to this fine attention, which really has got nothing to do with that ambitious force that got you to that point. This fine attention to detail, which is involved in forming a letter. So when we form a letter, 3 things have to come together: the eye, the brain, and the hand. So the brain is the easiest thing. You know, we're given the letter A, we're told how to form it, and you think, okay, yeah, I've got that. And then we're given this funny tool, which is a straight-edged nib in the Western calligraphy. And you have to hold it in a specific position, and you have to get the ink flowing through it, and it has to work with the board. And then that's when the problems begin, basically. You realize that you have to learn to move in a completely different way. So after you've done that for a long time, this takes endless hours of repetition and practice. Slowly, your eye begins to see the detail that is involved between a good letter and a not good letter, if you like, or an incorrect form and a correct form. And therefore, this process of learning goes on and on and on until one day, and it does happen. You never think that it's going to happen, but one day it just happens. And you can just watch these letters being formed, and you can watch the shape being correctly made, and it's rhythmical, and you just feel it, and it's a most wonderful feeling. So, I was trained in Western calligraphy, and as Emily said, for me that presented a particular approach to letter form, to letter marking, which was quite academic, it was quite intellectual. It was based on a set of rules, a very strict set of geometric rules. But I felt that there was more to it. And when I looked at the brush strokes of a Zen master, it was like electricity going through me. It was really an extraordinary moment of seeing this Zen scroll and just feeling this immediate connection with it. For me, it was like a contemporary piece of art, and it literally spoke to me. And I wanted to know who had made that mark and how it had so much freedom and vitality and spontaneity and innovation behind it. So this took me on another journey of learning the approach, the Oriental approach to mark making, to brushwork. And I discovered that all the rules changed. So no longer were you writing at a board and just using this part of your hand. You had to use your whole body. Your whole body became the instrument for that mark. And in a sense, it is spiritual, because nothing is left out of that process. So I have a prop to demonstrate. So this is a Zen brush. And it's very different to a calligraphy nib, as you can tell. It's actually made of wood, so we have the elements there, and this is horsehair here, and this has actually been hand-bound, so it's been bound by thread by a Zen master, and that's to keep the point together. And when we make a mark with this tool, we're not making it upright, we're making it on the floor, all right? So instead of making the mark across your body, you're making it towards your body, and that feels very different. It has a sense of coming home to yourself, of coming back to yourself. Now, you may just think that only masters and Zen practitioners can pick this up, but in the group that I practice with, anyone can pick this up and have a go. And part of the practice, after we've all made our marks, is to put them up and appreciate them. And this is another really important part of ambition and spirituality, because when you make that mark, you have to use absolutely every fibre of your being, subtly, mentally, physically, emotionally. Nothing is left out. And you can see from that mark everything. It's like a mirror to nature. So we put up all our and they're often a couple of kanji. These are Zen marks, Zen letters. This actually means na-mu, which is a bow, reverence. And we put them up, and we spend a long time looking at them, looking at the detail of the mark. And the whole way of looking is very different to our Western approach. We very rarely, we have to stop ourselves as Westerners from saying, I like that bit, I don't like that bit, it's worked there, it hasn't worked there. No, what we're looking for are the aesthetic qualities of a mark. And this has taught me so much about the marks we leave as human beings. And perhaps this leads on to what Emily was alluding to, writing with a needle. So after I'd done my degree in calligraphy, I kind of thought, well, if you can make a mark with a pen, you can make a mark with a brush, you can make a mark with a broom, then perhaps you can pick up this tiny little tool, which we call a needle, and actually write with that, actually make a mark with that. And my inspiration was the everyday handwriting of everyday people like you and I, because I find that fascinating. I find that says so much about the person, the moment, the event, the message. Again, it's like that person's voice. After they've gone, that's the mark they've left behind. And so when you stitch that, you become part of that moment, and you can get underneath the story, behind the intention of the person who made the mark, and you actually, in my experience, you very much feel what they felt when they made that mark. So when I first started doing this, I started doing it with a machine, but then I thought actually the most immediate thing is to do it by eye, by hand. And again, my ambition had to give way to the endless hours of just patient practice, of just looking at the marks of an individual and just copying that by eye in thread with a needle to actually emulate the handwriting of that person. So the story, the handwriting, this says so much about us as people, about our ambitions, about our spirituality. But for me, when I stitch that, I become part of that person. It bridges that gap. So, for instance, at the moment, I'm stitching. I like to take stories that, reveal something about our human nature. So at the moment, I've been stitching the handwriting of a young man. His name is Johnny Benjamin, and he has a schizoaffective disorder, which took him right to the brink of the bridge, and he was about to jump off the bridge. He was about to commit suicide. And this was a busy Monday morning. Commuters were just streaming by, and one man stopped, and they had a 15-minute conversation, and he talked him back from the edge of the bridge. And they were separated after that. Johnny went off to a psychiatric ward. This man disappeared, and they didn't meet again until 6 years later, and they were reunited on Waterloo Bridge, and they had this incredible meeting. And to me, that story is a story that needs to be told, because it says so much about us, about our humanity, about how important it is to just stop and talk and listen. So, as I say, I've been stitching Johnny's handwriting onto the actual T-shirt that he was wearing on the edge of the bridge. And it's been quite interesting because, as I say, you sort of become one with that emotion, that feeling. And these are quite dark, heavy feelings, as you can imagine. And the only thing I can liken it to is a bit like being on a stage. When you're on the stage, you're part of that role, you're part of that moment, you're completely absorbed, stitch by stitch, in that narrative. And then at the end of the day, you can just put it down and walk away. And I hope, as an artist, I tell that story fully through that act. So I don't know how much that has actually shed light. Perhaps I'd just like to end with, I've been scratching my head about this whole subject, to be honest, and so that's why I just sort of spoke from my own experience. But in desperation this morning, I just asked my postman. I just said to him, Mark, I've got to give this lecture tonight. What's your view on this? Anyway, it completely stopped him in his tracks. And he kind of said, he reacted in exactly the same way as I reacted, which was, well, I'm neither ambitious and I'm neither spiritual. I thought it was such a British way to react. And he said, you know, I'm a bit of a plodder, truth be told, you know, I just like to do my job and, you know, but I suppose the only ambition I've had, he said, is to make a good family, have a good family. And I said, well, have you? And he said, yeah. Anyway, then we started talking about my socks. I was wearing some silly socks, and he said, well, if you get lost for words, you can always show them your socks. Anyway, I hope it hasn't come to that, but I'd like to say thank you to Mark, the postman, and thank you for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rosalind, for your take on this particular subject. And it's becoming clearer, I think, that the spiritual world and the idea of ambition, they are completely connected in some way through the work that we do. Jeremy Sinclair talking about this church and the ambition required to create something like this is massive. And yet it does have the spiritual within it too. And as Rosalind was saying, the need to bring the spiritual to whatever you are doing in her work, it's really, really important. So very interesting to see these two takes on this particular subject. Our last speaker this evening is Dr. Poole, who, with a PhD in capitalism and theology, is hopefully very well placed to speak on this subject. She's worked for the Church Commissioners for England. She then changed careers and became a management consultant at Deloitte, and then latterly has taught leadership and ethics at Ashridge Business School, where she's currently an associate, which allows her to take time out to write books. She's also the first female chairman of the Governors of Gordonstoun School, and she has a wealth of hobbies and interests, and she also writes a blog called Eve's Commonplace. Despite of, and maybe because of, her wide variety of interests and careers, she comes across as a wonderfully down-to-earth person, enjoying life to the full in the very best sense. Please welcome Dr. Eve Poole.
Thank you. I too have some props. I thought I might, I suppose the best way to describe me is probably a corporate theologian. So I suppose a lot of my biography is about trying to integrate the two worlds of ambition and spirituality. So I thought I might tell you a little bit about what that's taught me so far and how we might journey forward from that place. So my first exhibit is a very special Mont Blanc stylus. I bought this in New Bond Street at the height of my career at Deloitte Consulting. I want to tell you about that because I was seriously impressive. Armed with my theology degree and my career for the Church of England, I'd gone off to do an MBA, and I thought it might be quite fun to apply for consulting because that seemed to be what everyone wanted to do. And the careers lady at Edinburgh laughed and said, well, they won't take a theologian, will they? So much to my surprise, and indeed Edinburgh's, I got a job there. They were so delighted they gave me Student of the Year award because who knew a theologian from the Church of England could go and work for Deloitte in capital markets. So I trotted around sorting out Swiss banks and, you know, various demergers in high tech in Silicon Valley and being fabulous, and being promoted every possible opportunity and being even more fabulous. And being a sort of young buck, I was very keen to sort of show that I was one of the kind of leading gang. So when all these partners were trotting around with their Mont Blanc fountain pens. I had a Palm Pilot, remember those heady days? And therefore I had a Mont Blanc stylus because I was so cool. And it was only after I'd procured said item and I was trotting around the office, making sure I flashed at every possible opportunity because it has this very Mont Blanc-y bit at the end, that I suddenly realised that it was a rather sad exhibit as a sort of evidence of my overweening ambition, and this as the measure of my success as a management consultant at Deloitte. But it is figural and interesting, because it was at that moment that I started noticing there was something a bit missing around all this rushing about being fabulous, which was that I had been so busy that I hadn't really been paying much attention to my spiritual life. And that took me on a long journey, setting up something called the Foundation for Workplace Spirituality and doing papers on spirituality and management and things like that, off to Cambridge to do a doctorate in capitalism and theology, as you've heard. And it was partly because I'd realised I had another ambition. I'd achieved all that Deloitte stuff, that was fabulous, and I had loads of money and pots of cash and a husband by then I'd met on a training course very conveniently. And I decided what I wanted was some children, because that's what cool people do when they've triumphed in career terms. They start a family these days. And so, I got cracking, got the husband, and, got organised on the underwear front. And nothing happened, really. And I was quite cross about this, because I was quite ambitious. I was from a family of 4 children. I knew it was my duty to, as my father would say, outbreed the idiots, and get on with it. A bit like your postman, have a family. And it was interesting, because I was used to things happening fairly automatically for me. I just had to sort of show up and be fabulous, and there you go. And I just was not getting pregnant. And it was quite an interesting experience to go through, because it was the first time I'd actually wanted something and had a very clear ambition about it, and it wasn't in my gift. And it took me on a very long and interesting journey around a whole load of spiritual counselling and weeping in front of statues of the Blessed Virgin Mary and things like that. And it also took me into millinery. You might be interested to hear, because we've been talking about craft, because I was fed up with waiting, and I found it very difficult to wait. So I had to take up something that was so absorbing, it required my whole body, a bit like the calligraphy that you talked about so beautifully. And I found my solace in millinery, so boy did I make a lot of hats. I got very ambitious about hat making, and about stitching, and about feathers, and about glorious things like that. And eventually I got a bit more humble about the extent to which I could command God and everybody else to my will. And eventually, Exhibit 2 had my little twins, with a bit of help. Yay, go me. And it was very interesting to reflect on that journey and think, well, what was that really about? What was the universe trying to teach me about my dialing up ambition, success at my fingertips? And it taught me quite a lot about what the word vocation means. I think when we think about ambition and spirituality, often that word vocation creeps in, which is there something that you think your soul is called towards, that if you work to that end, would give you both ambition and spirituality? And it struck me that I am the sort of person who is so motivated by ends, I often forget about means. And rushing around being obsessed by outcomes and Mont Blanc styluses, and not just one baby, by the way, 2 at once, without a C-section. What do you miss if you're so focused on outcomes and endpoints? Notice that seeking meaningful work and being ambitious for goals needs also to be reflected in how you work. So not just the teleology, the end of the work, the vocational output, but the everyday craft of working. And then that made me reflect on the themes I heard emerging in my work at Ashford Business School, largely in small, quiet rooms with very senior people being coached at the end of quite a stressful program. But to be honest, by the way, the most common reaction seemed to be that they would weep, because nobody really listened to them, nobody really cared. Often they had pretty awful jobs that made them quite unhappy. But they got on the treadmill, they had school fees to pay, they had the seventh wife who also had needs, and it was difficult for them to figure out how they could kind of row back from where they'd got to. And I started worrying about how we help people avoid getting trapped in these kinds of ambitious eddies that the world seems to be trying to surface us all towards. And that took me to my third exhibit, which is, I talk about handbags a lot at Gordonstoun because I'm the first female chief chairman, so it's very important to fly the flag for girl power. This is a Gordonstoun evening bag. You might recognise the tartan, those of you who know such things. And it's because it struck me that we're starting too late on with this. It's late on in the day, actually, today, but it's late on in the day for a lot of us here. It's really at school we need to be talking to people about ambition and spirituality. And I know a lot of you here are absolutely involved in education at that level. So I got involved in Gordonstoun because Gordonstoun is one of those schools that takes the development of character terribly seriously. And I know a lot of you here work with mindfulness and meditation with children in order to try and address mental health issues and anxiety that is besetting so many of our youngsters these days. And there's something really important about how we develop character early enough that we're able to stand up and be defiant if ambitions around us aren't actually where our spirit wants us to go. Because it's quite something to just turn your back on the glory because everybody else is rooting for you and egging you on. And I think this is one of the really fascinating things when you start looking into theological writings on vocation and on work. And often you just hear quoted back to you, you cannot serve two masters, and it's God or mammon. Or I think in career terms they say, it's the K or the Ks, don't they? Do you want a knighthood or do you want a load of loot? And I think for me there's something really quite instructive about that, about how we look at yearning and how we look at what we yearn for. Thomas Traherne, who was a forgotten mystic, I think, he was rediscovered quite late on, but was one of the metaphysical poets, writes a lot about this. He thinks that we'll never be happy until we're clothed with the heavens. And he sees this restlessness about being a journey back to God. And Rowan Williams has also written a lot about this. When he talks about consumerism, he doesn't necessarily see it as wholly negative. He sees it as misdirected. He sees that what happens with advertising is that there's a technology of desire being created, which is to try and tempt us forward to things that we feel are legitimate goals for us. And it does that beautifully. Consumerism is an incredible machine because there's always more that we can buy and more that we can become and more that we can achieve. And the trick is to remember that that is directional and it doesn't need to stop there because it can stop with God. And I think when you listen to people like Rowan Williams talking about ambition, he does ask us to keep stopping and checking, a bit like you've been hearing tonight, this sort of slightly jerky journey where you have to keep having moments on the hour every hour just to have a think about where am I in all of this? And am I managing to balance ambition and spirituality? Because I think sometimes they have different gods. And those gods can be Janus, there can be the same God with two faces. But we sometimes need to make an effort to bring them back into alignment in that way. And I know that's one of the things I'm still wrestling with, because I have twins to bring up. I'm involved in a school. I'm also involved in trying to help organizations figure out how we can improve capitalism. Because it's one thing to make us all perfect. They talk about taking the fish out of the fishbowl and giving them a good polish, but then putting them back into the dirty water. It doesn't matter how brilliant we all are individually if we're living in a society which is polluted. So there's something really important about how do we keep thinking, what is our level of ambition for creation? What's our level of ambition for the society we live in economically? And how can we keep going from the macro to the micro, figuring out how many of our very small little actions around what we pay attention to, where we spend our money, can be multiplied up into something which is more of a vision of creation, something that we really are ambitious for that we think is also truly spiritual. So those are my exhibits. A sad exhibit about my overweening ambition at Deloitte, a victorious but interesting ambition about being a mother, work in progress, and trying to think about character and how we develop character. So I think moving from outputs to inputs and also being really interested in process so that we're truly not just vocational about where we're trying to get to, but really vocational about noticing every step of the journey and making every step as beautiful as it could be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eve Poole. So, after that, I think it'd be lovely to have some questions. If anyone has any questions, and if they would like it to be answered by any particular speaker, or we can just open it up to the panel and see who would like to answer. We have some roving mics, so do raise your hands if you have a question. We have one over there.
Alan Rayner, thank you all for a wonderful series of talks. I would just like to take up Rosalind's point on art, because in schools today they're so exam-oriented that they've forgotten the creativity side. And in one school, if I may just give a very brief outline of it, after about 70 schools and being on a lifeline because they were so dangerous, I came into this grammar school where I had already gotten into their A stars for RS. And the first lesson, I had 4 classes of 120 girls, 30 in each. And I gave them a choice: do you want to be taught in the ordinary way or according to the school of philosophy? But there's a hitch, you have to do what I say. And the 3 things I made them do: the first lesson, silence, that's what I want, do you hear it? The second lesson, I said, the true self on the board, tell me about beautiful, it's wonderful, let me write that down. Third lesson, I said, remember stillness, silence, awareness, the true self. Draw the most beautiful thing you can, your mother a flower, but one difference, how Michelangelo and Leonardo were taught, you wash your hands as you do it, the tip of your pencil, and get on with it. They produced stunning work, it went right through the school. And when I thought about it afterwards, I knew it couldn't be me because I was just a supply. I knew that the school teaching was wonderful, but it couldn't be that. And the third thing, I suddenly realized, because 16 years, 17, coming up to me saying, we want that lesson, sir. And I wondered about it, and eventually it dawned on me that for the first time, these girls had seen their true self in their own creativity, and it was a Michelangelo right through the school. Every girl did her work perfectly.
Fantastic. Have we got any questions for any of the speakers? Thank you.
So my name's Andrew Deakoff. I'm feeling rather embarrassed about my exhibit, which is the latest carbon fibre Mont Blanc, complete with aircraft alloy cap. However, I can't claim to be successful or rich, so I'm just a fraud. So my question is this, and I'll explain a little bit about the background to that question. My question is ambition, or could ambition be a route or a way into spirituality? And my logic goes like this. I'm in business. I'm a business mentor to very senior business leaders, all of whom are infinitely more wealthy than I am, many of whom have more money than they know what to do within their lifetime sensibly. And so leadership is no longer about material wealth, it's about power or maybe something else. And the second thread is that I and many of my colleagues are passionate about this idea of business as a force for good. So as the world gets more discombobulated by climate change and other events, nations will become increasingly unable to do anything about it. And the true global corporations that we have vast potential for good. But unless the leaders connect with something beyond avarice, that's not going to happen. And the third thought is business people do things because they work. They have some profit either for the individual and or for the organisation. And so can we think about spirituality via ambition?
Thank you very much for that question. Would you like to answer it? Yeah.
Thank you, that's brilliant. I do think formally, of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, if we think about any training course you've ever been on where they show you sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's fairly obvious that you get bored of just stacks of cash and stacks of cars and stacks of suits and things. And these days you can keep going for really quite a long period of time before you bought every handbag in the world and all that kind of thing. But you know, that stuff becomes less attractive because more and more people can afford it. One thing I notice is very interesting is the rise in very competitive corporate philanthropy for that reason. And that can have a sort of slightly dark side, but actually it's fabulous. And I do think that we all get a bit more grown up about it, and you realise those kinds of things don't make you happy. And I do think there is a moment in your life, which I see a lot in the people that come to me at Ashridge, where you get more interested in legacy. And that might be family, but it's often also about, well, what am I really standing for and what am I going to be proud of? And it won't be the money. I think the only problem is, though, that we can get a bit distracted by the sort of trappings of success. There was a rather horrid study recently about ethics and wealth, rather showing that your ethical ability tends to diminish the wealthier you get. And there was also a link with emotional intelligence diminishing as well. And they thought this was because the richer you get, the more sort of insulated you are from your fellow man, because you're rushing around being so busy in gated communities, in limousines and, you know, with servants and things. You have so many intermediaries, you don't actually meet very many people. You have your circle that you see a lot. And actually you don't need to borrow a cup of sugar from the neighbour or offer to babysit or something because you've got staff and you've got money. So there's a sort of breakdown in the need to have normal interpersonal relationships with all kinds of people around you. So they think that that is one of the only problems around ambition that is expressed in consumption and the acquisition of material wealth as a marker, that it can just make you distracted and then start retuning your moral compass and making you feel you don't need the spirit because you can have your needs met elsewhere. So I hope for the former. I see it more than the latter, to be honest, and I'm sure the panel will also agree on that.
Thank you very much. Yes, another question.
Jeremy, school governor, and the question really comes from the point of view of education and children. From my observation, both a parent and a governor, and looking at society, there is a lot of acceptance towards ambition, and that's accepted and people are encouraged. Spirituality, I think in the last 10, 20 years, there's been a shift towards acceptance of a spiritual life. Where there seems to be confusion is with religion. And I just wonder what the panel thought about this, because of the recent example of the Odeon banning the advert, including the Lord's Prayer. And what message are we as a society sending out to our children about the right to express a spiritual life and being ambitious about that?
So the question about the leading a spiritual life and being open about that and ambitious about that, absolutely. Would like to ask that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to whether you believe you have a soul. I just think, and when I say a soul, I mean a hinterland, I mean another dimension, I mean something that is beyond your mind, beyond your body, and I think the more we can get in touch with that sense of our souls, of our individual souls, if you like. It has to start with the individual, of actually when you feel most yourself, what it is you can do that you feel that soul connection, whether it is, and it's often the most simplest things. I think let's start with that. Let's start with discovering our souls.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to answer that question also?
I think you're right. We are in a muddle about religion versus spirituality. I had a very bizarre conversation with one of the editors of Harvard Business Review about this several years ago. I wanted to give them a piece on organizational spirituality, as it was then called. And he had a sort of panic attack. It was very odd, and he started quoting the Constitution at me. And it was really interesting. We love it, religion, wars and bombing and hideousness, which of course is unhelpful and doesn't really teach anybody anything apart from confusion. And I fear that that's what we're now importing in the UK, is we've decided religion is negative, a bad brand. So if we just go on about spirituality, then we can all live in peace and harmony. But we all know that religions are just expressions of particular spiritualities, and we can't duck that. We do need to have grown-up conversations about what it means to live together when you don't believe the same things. And you can't just sort of net that out and say we've all got souls, because we've all got different beliefs about what our souls are, if we have them or not, and what we're here for, and what our bodies are for, and all those kinds of things, and also what the end of our life is about, and what sacrifices we might make in suicide bombings, for instance, on that front. So I do think there's something really interesting about the extent to which we are able to curate safe spaces for children to learn about religious difference well, rather than just airbrushing it out of the curriculum and hoping nobody notices. We've had some very interesting, as a Board of Governors, the PREVENT legislation, you'll know, is now a statutory responsibility for all of us. So in our last board meeting, we had a discussion about that, because we have quite an international community at Gordonston. It's always been about a third international students. And there was one boy who had been flagged as having accessed some sort of jihadi websites. And so there'd been a conversation with him about what that was about. And he said, well, to be honest, the West have been bombing our countries for years. You know, do you think we were going to just forget about it? It's a good point. And actually, we do need to be able to allow everybody to talk about what they've inherited in their culture, in their religion, where they're from, and try and figure that out in a grown-up way rather than just hoping that it'll all go away. So I agree, it's a real dilemma. Thank you.
Jeremy, would you like to say something?
For my sins, I'm on the board of a charity called the Tony Blair Faith Foundation. In fact, I'm the chairman. And the idea of that is to encourage faiths not to kill each other. And the reason why I'm personally interested in it is that I think unless faiths prove that they're good, they will die, and they deserve to die. Faith needs to be recognized for what it is. It needs to do good works in the name of its God. And until that happens, we're going to get war and war and war. And Tony Blair's vision, I think, was extraordinary. Many years ago, when he was still in Number 10, he saw that the future was religious wars, which is where we now are. And so our job, I think, as anyone who's interested in living spiritual, has got to be to draw the best out of every religion. I'll give you an example. We live in Europe, and Europe is a predominantly Christian continent. We forget this. We say we are multinational, multiracial, multi-denominational. This is a Christian continent. Now that should govern our behavior towards people trying to come to Europe. We should be Christian towards the rest of mankind. But we should know we're doing it in a Christian spirit. Now, My view is that those that come need to recognise they're coming to Christendom. It's a simple word. People need to know that this is Christendom. That's why it's successful, because people here have obeyed the laws of Christ and the laws that led up the Judaic laws as well. But this is primarily recognition of what is there. If people don't recognise it, it leads to division and all the rest of it. So I think it's very important, because as a governor, we're both on the same governors of the same school, is that we teach the importance and the power of religion at its best.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you to all three speakers. I thought Rosalind was excellent, but I'm biased as I'm her husband. The question is to Jeremy. Ambition can be individual and by its nature limited, or universal and unlimited. The question is, how can the ambition of any action, however small it is, include the welfare of all? If that makes sense.
So how can the ambition of any small any task, however small it is,
how can it be universal?
How can it be universal?
You must notice the less you do, the better things go. So that when you're really playing cricket at its best, when you're playing tennis at its best, you're not there. So the ambition in any project is to allow that project to proceed without your presence, without your help. And if you're not there, it is universal. It's the identification with the individual that makes the action personal and selfish. So the view here is that the less you do, the better, and the greater the ambition. The ambition primarily is not to be individual. That make sense?
Very succinct answer, thank you. Yes.
My name is Chris Rees. A number of the speakers have spoken of ambition as related to the goal, to the end. But I remember, Jeremy, a weekend when you suggested that we all ignore the end and focus entirely on the means. How do you manage this tension between means and end in the context of this conversation?
Is there any particular speaker you'd like to answer that? Open it up to the...
I think when you have an idea, well, when I have an idea, it comes really clearly, and it's almost like a sort of visual spark. And if I was to freeze frame that, it would be brilliant, because everything would be there. But that's like the initial intention to start. And then you carry on, then you embark on this process, on this journey. And so much can happen on that journey. So many unexpected things can happen on that journey. If you were completely fixated on that first vision, then you would miss the incidental happenings. And I always, for instance, when I get a commission, the client will have an idea, and we'll talk a lot about what that idea could be, or what the qualities that they want that commission to be. But it's very important to go through this stage of just keeping it completely open, so that the process can just take you in all sorts of areas, and then it just happens along the way that you put your boundaries in, you put your markers in, and the thing takes the course of its own. So that's what I would say. You have this first idea, but then you have to let it just go on its own journey and see where it'll end. I don't know if that helps.
Just a quick thing on that. I do really hear this as a struggle, because I do feel it's about holding both lightly and intention. So in strategy, they often talk about the difference between, getting a boat and going to Calais for lunch. There might be somebody swimming the channel or a boat or something, but generally you've got a map and you can kind of get there, and you've got some euros and whatever, and you can get on with it. As opposed to trying to discover the Northwest Passage, where you kind of got an idea it's kind of west and maybe northish, and you need to focus an awful lot on the capacity in your boat. You need some chaps who are quite flexible. You need to be able to cope with hot conditions and wet conditions, and you need limes for scurvy and a whole load of things that may or may not be useful to you. You don't know yet. And if you get to the middle of the ocean and there's nothing there, you need to figure out what you're going to do next. So there's something about constantly checking that the ends aren't becoming so important in and of themselves that any means will do to get you there. Neither do you want the means to become so important that you sacrifice the end because you've got sort of obsessed with the means and the journey rather than the destination. So I'm constantly trying to keep both in tension in parallel and keeping each other honest, really, to make sure that they're in balance, if that helps.
Yes, thank you very much. The question relates to your point about needing to get the spiritual dimension to young people, to get it early enough in the cycle. And I've been working in some areas where they're using values as the language, as the spiritual language, because they can't speak so much about religion. And I'd like to know what your view is about using this, values which are natural to all of us: compassion, courage, generosity. I've even visited some schools in India where the government has made everything very secular, and so they can't speak of anything religious or spiritual, but they are looking at values. What do you think about that?
I suppose I worry about the neutrality and relativity of the word value, because it has become valueless in overuse. But I know what you're talking about, and I do think that seems to be a very healthy way in to get people to surface belief systems that they hold. I'm still a fan of virtue, because I think people instinctively get that isn't something that is neutral. Virtue is supposed to be a positive thing. Values are supposed to be valuable, but they don't seem to be. And we know from corporate values that they sort of change quite often and get dropped and picked up and all that kind of stuff. So people have lost faith in values, I think. What I notice is that in some of the alternative primary school curricula, introducing philosophy earlier on is really helpful, because you can use philosophy and metaphysics as a very, quote, secular way into talking about the hinterland, the other, what else is there, and allowing people to notice that these are all habits of thought, and that we can unthink them. Other people have thought differently, other people will always think differently, and being more practiced at thinking, as well as trying to help people surface the design assumptions they have too around their belief systems.
Yes, I've listened to what's been said about ambition, and I wonder if we're trying to make the word ambition mean something that really is about vision. The example of this church, my question really is about Christopher Wren and the great architects. Before they could put this into operation, they would have had a vision. And it seems to me that vision is something which is very much inherent in the individual soul, if you like. The ambition seems to be, and this is my question to you, is it not an addition to that vision? I'll just give you a couple of examples. I run a business, and running that business, I have a vision of what that business should do, what it should aspire to, which is to give service, best service it can, and serve the community, to make a reasonable profit and so on. My wife, interestingly, from Eva's experience, wanted to get pregnant many years ago. And what she recognised, I'm sorry she's not here, but she will verify this, that the moment she gave out that idea, I had nothing to do with it, of course, but once she'd given that idea up, she became pregnant. She gave that ambition up. And the question also is about Justice Day. You see, you must have a vision of Justice Day. What it does for me, I don't know if it does for anyone else, I hope it does, it just reminds me. It reminds me of what I am, something of what I am, what I really am, in the sense of being a spirit. And I can't say that's an ambition. It's a vision. And I think it's a wonderful vision. And perhaps we can extend it to every single day. But that's my question. I think, is it not so that when we look at it carefully, we're trying to make ambition take the place of vision?
So the question being, are we trying to make ambition take the place of vision, having a vision for business or for life? Who'd like to answer that question?
You have a vision, that's good. I think you need a mechanism to realise it, and that I would call ambition. Vision is no good if it's sitting behind a picture frame. It needs to be in action. And what gets it into action is ambition. Gives an emotion behind it. But I do agree, a vision is good. Yeah, helps you see where you're going. But you do need to get up and go. And that's the ambition.
Could I add something which has been occurring to me as we've been talking, which is about quality? There's something about, you could have an unambitious vision. And it's about balancing this means and ends, the journey and the destination, so that not only is it a quality orientation you're heading towards, but the way in which you approach that is full of quality. So you're ambitious for yourself in relation to how you are going to achieve that vision.
Hello. I'd just like to say thank you all very much for a lovely evening. Really enjoyed the talks. I'd just like to talk about briefly the impression of religion upon younger people today, and how religion can be accepted by younger people or maybe not accepted, and partly due to today's world events, which are, there's lots of violence in the world, as you know. And I'd like to just go back to Jeremy Sinclair's talk about Christian values earlier on in Europe. And I know you mentioned Tony Blair and the Christian values. My question is, do you feel that maybe religion is being muddied with the world's desire for resources? Because my concern is that some of the world's wars these days are perceived by the media and by world leaders as done for the force of good. This is a battle between good and evil. And my concern is that the thirst for resources, especially in the Middle East with the oil, is actually being muddied by these so-called values for goodness in society. We're going into for the good to defeat evil, whereas in actual fact a lot of these wars tend to be about the oil. And there's a protest, you know, in the world of protests these days, there's a saying which goes, an eye for an eye makes everyone blind. And my concern is the more wars we have with Muslims and Christians and vice versa, or whoever else, we're just turning everybody blind.
Thank you very much. But do you have any particular speaker who you'd like to direct that to? Jeremy Sinclair. Thank you.
yes, we'll all go blind if we poke each other's eyes out. I'm with you on that. I come back to the point I was touching on earlier, is that I think religions have a tremendous duty. They have to prove their worth. And they have to prove their worth by loving mankind. They have to open their doors to people who don't believe in them. They have to serve the world. And if they don't, they will rightly, in my view, disappear. Because the Western current is against religion, as various people have mentioned. And so it's got to prove its worth. Now, I think there's another side to it that needs to be done, which is research needs to be done that encourages people to have faith. You'll live longer. You're less likely to get divorced. You're less likely to have an abortion. All the good things in life that keep people happy are more likely to happen if they have faith. Now, somebody needs to make these arguments. But if it's just a camouflage for an argument about oil, it deserves to go. The nature of the creation is that things, when they cease to have a purpose, crumble. As this will do if we don't look after it and clean it and all the rest of it. It should crumble. Otherwise there'd be no space for anything else. And so religions will crumble unless they serve humanity, in my view. And we also, part of that is them making the case for faith itself.
I sort of both agree and disagree with that, because I do think there is something around ambition trumping spirituality in some of these realms. There's a lovely bit in one of Shakespeare's plays about Richard II, and about he stands no chance against Bolingbroke, because Bolingbroke will bring a soldier, and for every soldier Henry has an angel. And I think the problem is, if you have an ambition and use your religion to fuel it, to make sure you will never give up, then you are unbeatable. But then whose God are you really serving, ambition or spirituality there? And I think I agree with you, that's where we see often conflicts which are fairly
Yes?
Yes. I would like to be impolite, but since I'm a Dutchman, I can be more open than most of the people here. And secondly, because I've devoted the second part of my life after business career helping people to find their way in the world. And I always think of Emerson, who says, the talent is the call. Each man has a vocation. The talent is the call. And now my impolite side is that I ask each of the three on the platform whether they have searched for their talent, actually doing full justice to their talent, because that is the call, that's the vocation. Whether they are doing that already, whether they are promising that they will do that in the future.
Fantastic. Ros, would you like to go first for that one? Thanks. I agree. I think it's about discovering what you love. And I think you need to do that every single day. I think you need to connect in some way, again with your soul, do something for your soul every day. And that's totally to do with love, and I think it's a little bit to do with talent as well. So yes, every day. I try.
I think my talent is that I have no patience with people who make things very complicated. So I like to make things simple again. Whether it's about boiling all the theology down to a 2x2 matrix or destroying capitalism in 7 chapters. Whenever I see people being frightened off by experts telling them that they should go away and leave it to the grown-ups, then I like to wade in and try and make things simple again. So that's what I'm about.
I'm going to leave the question as to whether I've found my talent to God. At the end of the day, he can decide whether what I did was a good use of the cards that he dealt me. But I'll tell you, my favourite card is a word, words. I'm a writer, so I live by words. I see people fall into trouble by words. There's a recent example, recent history in this country. The last government, Labour government, got us into huge financial deficit, huge debts. And their simple misuse of words. Instead of calling spending spending, they call it investment. What a wonderful thing spending is. It's suddenly become investment. And there's no limit to that. Always good investment. And then, of course, there was a crisis followed on this, and they called it a credit crunch. Remember the credit crunch? Rubbish. It was a debt crisis. You change the word, you change the world. So the words are the key. Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, right there.
Good evening. My name is Elias Whitworth, and what I have found
Can you please, sorry, keep the mic very close to your mouth. It's
what
hard
I
to hear.
have found recently that religions, all of them, are man-made. There are no divine. And as God is one, so is his message to the whole of humanity. And therefore there is contradiction in between an existence of plenty different religions and one God and his message to the humanity. So my ambition is to design within a special, proper way, obviously, and procedure, to design the one divine law for the whole of humanity. You can call it religion, but I don't want anyone to misunderstood divine law with religion, because religion can be multiplied and there will be an existence of many religions which contradict each other, in between each other. But divine law, like domestic law within a country, should serve for the whole of humanity as God is one, so is his message. And this is my ambition, to create such one divine law for the whole of humanity. I have designed in order to implement this concept to the it is pretty difficult so far. My steps are very little, if so even. But my question to all three speakers is this ambition too big? Is this ambition not realistic? Is there something wrong about this ambition? Thank you.
Thank you.
All three speakers, please.
I think it's a fabulous. Suppose I have a question about why. In that I have a rather basic understanding of religion, I think, which is if there is one true God, which is what I believe, why would God not let down a whole host of different ladders to help us get back to him? And depending on where you are born in the world, in which generation, and in which context, in which tribe, why would those ladders not all be different? Some short, some long, some rickety, some smooth, I don't know. I don't have a problem with the kind of coexistence, theologically speaking. It doesn't affect my God, because God is not affected by our belief. I think the fabulous Terry Pratchett once wrote a book called Small Gods, where the size of the god was directly proportional to the number of followers they had. So they had some really massive gods, and then they had a few squeaking in the desert because no one believed in them anymore. And I think sometimes we're so furiously trying to defend our God by having the biggest one great mammoth mergers and acquisitions of all the religions. I'm not sure God's very interested in that. I think God's interested in the quality of our relationship with God. And I think within all the religions we are resourced to try and figure out how, as religions, we can see the different ladders reach across and try and understand what it is we're all up to. Because I think you're right. I think there is something true at the heart. I don't know if we need to do too much artificial meshing of it, though. But if you can, it would be brilliant.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. I think we need to wrap up, and I think we'll finish with a moment of silence again. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've heard some fantastic answers to the question about spirituality and ambition and their connection with each other. We've heard about intention, and we've heard about giving the same emphasis to the means as well as to the end, and how the spiritual really always combines with ambition, and they support each other in our journey in life. I'd just like to finish this evening by thanking all the speakers who've given their time this evening, the musicians, and of course Elizabeth Edmonds for creating this event for us, and also to the who run the church and who've been so kind in helping us to set up this evening. So thank you very much all, to you as well, for coming this evening and hearing the speakers. Thank you very much, and thank you for your questions. Thank you.
That's not working very well.
Everything all right?
Yeah, great.
If I turn it-
Perfect, yeah. Hi, I'm Nathan Ray. I'm being the video producer at the event today, managing the live stream and the video. Please consider subscribing to this channel. You'll find the subscribe channel, the subscribe button down the bottom here somewhere. That way you can see the videos and get information about the new videos as they're published on this channel, and also be notified for events in the future. Yep, so please subscribe to this channel. I'm Nathan Ray. I provide live streaming services at nathanray.co.uk if you're interested. That's it. It's been a good live stream this evening. Thank you for watching, and I think we'll leave it there. Thank you. Bye. You can stop recording now, guys, if you want. Are you getting some footage, Jeremy? Anthony?
Stuff coming through.
Is that the SD card?
Yeah. Have you got the little red card? Red.
Yeah, it's in No, I had the the card holder in my pocket and it's all bent up in the racks.
What was that? Decent one?
Yes, I know. I'm trying to put you on.
Okay.
Interesting, that, yeah.
Okay, you got it all?
Top job.
Good. Well done.
No, you did a top job.
Cheers, cheers.
Take the rest of the night off.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.